there is an evolution, even in the West, towards this more proactive approach, towards listening more to the body. But I do think that within the realm of very traditional Western medicine, sometimes that overall focus and multi layered approach that exists in Ayurveda can be lacking.
Have you ever wondered if the true secret to glowing skin isn't in a product or found in a bottle, but in the daily rituals that nurture your body, your mind, and your soul? In a world where Western beauty often emphasizes quick fixes and anti-aging treatments, what if there's a deeper, more holistic way to care for your skin that also supports longevity? Well, today we're exploring the intersection of skin health, longevity, and Ayurveda with my guest, Shrankhla Holecek, the CEO and founder of Uma Oils. Shrankhala brings over 20 years of experience in the therapeutic benefits of botanicals and a profound and deep understanding of Ayurveda, a science that she's been immersed in since she was a child. Growing up in India in a family known for crafting the purest organic essential oils, she learned how ancient Ayurvedic traditions could be seamlessly integrated into modern beauty and wellness. As a lifelong yogi, vegetarian, and natural medicine practitioner, Shrankhala educates on Ayurveda with a contemporary sensibility and a modern perspective, helping us navigate and cut through the cluttered beauty space of today. And in a time where Western beauty standards often emphasize fighting aging or being anti-aging, Ayurveda takes a really different perspective, one that embraces aging as natural and graceful. Ayurveda's wisdom goes beyond surface treatments, really looking at the root causes of skin issues and recognizing that healthy skin is a reflection of overall wellness. In contrast, most Western skincare routines and products focus on the external fixes, looking at ingredients that promise immediate results. But are these quick wins really sustainable in the long run? In our conversation today, Shrankhala shares how Ayurveda allows for a more personalized approach to skincare and why embracing aging rather than fighting it leads to deeper, more sustainable beauty. We also explore how simple daily rituals like self-massage with oil not only enhance skin health through nourishment and detoxification, but also support emotional well-being, concepts that are really deeply intertwined in Ayurvedic philosophy. So, if you're curious about blending Ayurvedic practices with modern skincare and embracing aging as a beautiful journey, this episode is for you. Let's discover together how the fusion of East and West can really transform the way that we care for our skin and for ourselves. I am so happy to share my conversation with Shrankhla Holecek about skin health and longevity. I'm Dr. Avanti, and this is The Healing Catalyst. Hello, Shrankhala. It is so lovely to meet you. We've been going back and forth for a few weeks, so thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited. So I am so excited to talk to you all about Ayurveda and skin and longevity. You have a company that is a beauty company specifically in the Ayurveda category. So I know that you know a lot. I know that you also have a background in Ayurveda in the sense of a family history. So I would love to first know, just really quickly, if you could just sort of give our listeners sort of a little bird's eye view into sort of your perspective and maybe, how you ended up starting a beauty company in the Ayurveda category.
So, Avanti, so I'll probably start with that question first because I would admit perhaps that it was initially grudgingly that I was immersed into Ayurveda. I went to boarding school very young in my life, in part because where my parents live is a rural part of India dedicated to farming. And so that my sister and I could get an education, that was a little bit more rounded and modern. My parents sent us to boarding school, and I could not wish to get further away from their rural roots, Ayurveda, all of which felt at that time to me like it was too Indian, too accepted in the West, and everything that I felt was cool wasn't Ayurveda. So, in early years when we practiced Ayurveda as we did as a family, I did not espouse those rituals very willingly, and I would say founding this company was a 360 journey back, not just to bringing those Ayurvedic principles to the rest of the world in an authentic fashion, but also finding myself and accepting who I really was. And I think that is a lifelong journey we all are on, unpacking who we are, learning to love ourselves for who we are and our unique qualities. But that definitely has been the case for me with starting Uma over 7 years ago. And with every passing day, month, and year, learning more about myself, learning more about Ayurveda, learning more about my family's heritage and history with Ayurveda, which goes back nearly 1,000 years at this point, and how they've grown and evolved as people in that journey. So sort of that generational piece of this is also fascinating to me as I learn about it.
Yeah. I'm sitting here shaking my head. Those of you who are listening can't see me doing that. But yeah, I identify with so much of what you're saying. I kind of feel that when I was growing up, it was just part of what we did every day. And I grew up here in the United States. And so it was sort of like, okay, this is how we eat. This is how we, do routines. This is what we do when we get home from school. And, all of those things that we would do every day, it was just a way of life. And I think for me, it wasn't so much of, going away from Ayurveda, but more going into medicine and pursuing my career in medicine. And so I sort of found that I was studying medicine and I had to let go of a lot of Ayurveda in the sense of it just wasn't practical for the season of life that I was in. But that resulted in all kinds of issues. And then I made my way back as well, because I saw the wisdom much in the same way that you were saying that, you started to see the wisdom in what you had grown up with it. And you have a different appreciation for what we've grown up with, which is this beautiful, rich history and this science of healing and medicine that is so profound and so powerful. I feel so blessed that I have the opportunity to share this with everyone. I don't know how you feel about that.
And before I touch on that, I have to say I feel so blessed for leaders as yourself who marry some of the best of the West with some of the best of the East. And in a slight digression, I think some of the reasons Ayurveda lost its footing in India was that when we were under British rule, Ayurveda just didn't work as a way of ruling the masses. And at a time, they were trying to introduce Western medicine. So, in many forms, it got banned. It got itself a very bad reputation. The whole snake oil parallels started to be drawn. And it is lovely to see a resurgence led by scientific minds as yourself, because there is a real place for, I rely on Western medicine every day
Absolutely.
of my
For
life.
sure.
There's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely this modern world we live in that
Mm-hmm.
requires that.
Right.
But I do like that you're helping bring that balanced approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like I needed to touch on that.
Thank you.
And please remind me, I have lost track of the question you asked.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I think we were just talking about sort of going back to our roots in Ayurveda and sort of what we grew up with, and sort of we've both been led back to it in different realms, but very related. And so I was just appreciating that about you. Um, I would love for us to sort of, switch gears a little bit and really talk about the Ayurvedic approach to skin and skin health and sort of this idea that, skin, the largest organ in the body, is a reflection of overall health. In Ayurveda, we say it's a mirror it's an outer mirror of what's going on inside. And so how would you say, that, given that you have a skincare company that is in the Ayurvedic category, so you've really sort of gone deep into the skin aspects of Ayurveda, how do you think that these principles of skin health, either align or differ with a Western approach to skin health?
I'm so glad you're asking that question because I like to think that the answer is one that touches on an overall philosophical acceptance of what Ayurveda is. And while I do see, and fortunately, increasingly more so, thanks to doctors such as yourself, some focus on what may be going on underneath when it comes to dermatology as it's practiced in the West. The better dermatologists will talk to you about acne, especially persistent acne stemming from hormonal imbalances. There's even more dialogue around menopause and hormones that play a role. And this is coming out a little bit more out in the open, the promise of hormonal supplementation or replacement therapies. So I will say that we're in a better place with Western dermatology than we were at a time where we were just sort of saying oil-free everything will get you rid of acne, and sort of these big labels that did not speak to the personalization
Mm-hmm.
of skincare to the individual. And that's where I probably will start, in that Ayurveda to me empowers you to take care of your personal type. Most of your listeners likely know about the doshic balances, the Vata Pitta Kapha, and our original Prakritis. But Ayurveda encourages you to honor that in a big way. So while in the West, nearly all acne will be treated the same way with the same sort of RXs, an Ayurvedic doctor will take a very personalized approach in understanding why your skin condition may be manifesting the way it is. And two people with acne may be put on completely different protocols based on that consultation, which is also to say it is a way to lean in and hone into your intuition and really what your body tells you to guide what your skincare should look like, including seasonal changes, including changes in your diet.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then there is a proactive nature to Ayurveda that often in the West is reactive. Ayurvedic practitioners and an Ayurvedic lifestyle will encourage you to care for yourself in a way that disease doesn't manifest. So
Mm-hmm.
acne shouldn't be happening. It does. I mean, it's easier said than done. Oh, live an Ayurvedic lifestyle and all will be well. But much of it is focused on prevention and an overall lifestyle approach to just managing your body so that disease, which acne or other skin symptoms such as psoriasis, eczema, can be symptomatic of. So there is that sort of proactive reactive difference as well that I see as a difference in the West and the East. I like to think that there is an evolution even in the West towards this more proactive approach, towards listening more to the body. But I do think that within the realm of very traditional Western medicine, sometimes there is that overall focus and multi layered approach that exists in Ayurveda can be lacking.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think what you're also getting at is, in the West, it's very much at first an out to in sort of approach. It's sort of like, let's get rid of the symptoms that are showing up on the skin. And we're not really looking too deeply at what's going on underneath the skin. So what's coming from the inside out. And I think in Ayurveda, sort of what you're alluding to with the doshas and sort of this idea that, acne can be of different types depending on whether it's vata, pitta, or kapha induced sort of imbalance, is that we're looking at it from an inside out sort of perspective. Right. And I do think that you're right. In the West, we have started looking at more of the in to out sort of perspective. A lot of dermatologists are starting to look at that. But I think in general, it is still sort of a let's put everything on top of the skin rather than work from the inside of the skin outward to fix sort of the root cause of what's going on.
Very fair to say. And to every Western doctor's credit, I will say it's also sort of like a mindset issue around from their, I'll just call them consumers, where you want a very rapid fix, but give me something that will zap this or remove the appearance of such and such. So sometimes when you look at your audience, you have to give them what they want, otherwise they will not take any of it. So I see both sides of it a little bit.
Right. And so, the thing that I've been thinking about, obviously, I have this new book coming out called The Longevity Formula. So it's all longevity and sort of aging. And I know, for many of us who, as we get into our 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond, we see changes in our skin. That's one of the places that we see wrinkles or just, loss of elasticity, some of those changes that are telling us that we're getting older and aging, quote, aging, right?
Right.
And in the West, there's so much hoopla around anti-aging, and every skin formulation, they'll have a whole line of anti-aging regimen and all this kind of stuff. And I this anti-aging stuff is a hard one for me because I feel like, why should we be against something? But let's sort of talk about, the Ayurvedic perspective of skin health and longevity. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Again, I love dialoguing about this because there's so much. I mean, there's also sort of social impetus that works a certain way. And sometimes I think it can feel a little bit semantical in terms of what we call it. So I'll, sort of try to steer clear of quote unquote terms we're using in modern parlance to I think, say the thing that Ayurveda says, which is elongate vitality, preserve rasa in the body, and thrive as long as you can. Now, these words to me don't mean reverse natural processes. Right. They don't mean also topical approaches to, put lipstick on a pig, if you will. These are definitely, in my mind, approaches to be as well within this body that we've been given for as long as possible. That while some elements of aging that just come with time, whether it is arthritis in the bones and vata taking over the body, the idea is the longer you can stay balanced, the better you might feel in the body. And that, I believe, is the central tenet of Ayurveda when it comes to longevity. Take care of yourself, remain balanced, tailor your diet, lifestyle, skincare to the changes, whether it is in age, stage of life, or it is to the seasons or the environment you're in. And you'll find that you're living your best life for as long as possible. So I know it's a lot of words, but I think that's the Ayurvedic perspective on it, because again, I go into a little bit into mythology, but just as a parallel in which when you read sort of the Mahabharata, which was written a very, very long time ago, these guys were in their 70s and 80s and sort of fighting battles as if they were projected as youthful young individuals
Right.
in battle. And this is I'm not espousing any war and so on, but it just makes you think that Ayurveda and that style of living allowed you to thrive longer and feel better. And I think, to me, that feels like longevity.
Yeah, I mean, and all our nannies and dadis, our grandparents and our buas and like all of our aunts, and they all have beautiful skin into their 50s, 60s, 70s, and it's sort of like, what were they doing? And I really do believe it's this perspective of really, taking care of the skin. But also it's from the outside in, but also from the inside out, right? It's sort of a dual approach that we have in Ayurveda, and the idea of aging gracefully, and not looking at it as trying to stop time, but living gracefully with time. I feel like that is such the perspective that we grow up with all the skin regimens and the different remedies that they make at home for our skin packs, or for hair oiling, or whatever it is. And all of these things have become super popular in Western culture. I think really credit to you and many of the Ayurvedic brands out there, which are changing that narrative, which we'll get to also. But, I do think that we just have a different approach of how we think about specifically longevity and aging. But then when it comes to skincare, beauty, we also have a perspective of the long term. In addition to, of course, you don't want to have rashes and difficulty on your skin, but we have sort of this long-term approach to how we approach everything.
Precisely. And it's built in sort of almost unthinkingly, habitually, ritualistically, done as a community. And it's almost sort of joyous and not boring routine that I think almost helps you not think about aging at all, which I think in turn contributes to, not being stressed, and therefore,
Yep.
you know, be having that longevity around better skin, better health,
Right.
better mindsets longer.
Yeah. And I mean, that also goes back to the idea that, we see this as young kids, and we're doing these practices when we're children, oiling our hair, massaging our skin. So it's not like something that we do reactively, as you said, it's proactive, right? And so, in a beauty industry in the West where it is so focused on the quick fix, do you, and obviously that's very different than Ayurveda. Do you see that there's any kind of a shift in the mindset of what you're seeing being in this industry now for 7, 8 years, as you said? Is there any kind of a shift towards this long-term approach?
I was thinking about this question coming into the call, and I would say shift I do see is that people are starting to think more 360 in terms of, I do see that women are thinking about inside out, in that they are adding supplements to their skincare. They are perhaps recognizing that if you add a 2-3 minute facial oil massage to your regimen, that's going to serve you well. I see that with the caveat that I'm still sort of waiting for that understanding as to why this lifestyle works, and the
Mhm.
other elements to truly make this lifestyle work. Sort of understanding that rest and managing your worries are very important to skincare, but those are areas we will continue to take shortcuts. There's still sort of this desire and emphasis for, even after you're doing these things, for that instant result, that somehow flies in the face of this lifestyle that we're trying to imbibe. So I do think we have some ways to go in terms of really, because it is a step change from topical to lifestyle and diet and wellness. So
Mhm.
it's a bit of a roundabout answer, and maybe it is wishful thinking to think that it'll go away
Right.
overnight.
Right.
But I think those are some of the small but meaningful changes I'm seeing while I look at sort of the bigger picture of what that life and lifestyle might look like.
And do you feel like Ayurveda has been a big sort of, reason that maybe we're starting to move that way because it's become so popular? I mean, it's a whole category on itself. It wasn't before, which I love.
Absolutely, and I do believe that many of the things, whether it is rituals, practices, ingredients, lifestyle habits such as meditation, are definitely driven from Ayurveda. Sometimes people don't know they're driven from Ayurveda. Very often, we're in a dialogue about Ayurveda, and people don't recognize that yoga and Ayurveda are sister sciences, if you will. So there is still that, but I wholeheartedly believe that these practices from the East that go back 3, 4, 5,000 years are a massive driving force behind
Mhm.
some of these changes.
Mhm.
What I would love to see as we get deeper is a prevention of the bastardization of the term. In that, because it is popular and big, I think there is a temptation to slap a label
Yep.
and and sort of not do your duty. At the end of the day, Ayurveda was created and handed down generously free of cost by sages that wrote about it. And Sushruta didn't patent or whatever, didn't safeguard those secrets. And I do think that everyone working in Ayurveda has a responsibility to educate on a deeper level, give back what we take from Ayurveda, which will help sort of the understanding grow truly in a more robust way, allow people to actually take away more than just quote unquote skincare. Or
Right.
I don't want people that use an Uma product to think, oh, I've done my Ayurveda bit. At the end of the day, product is the last thing. It's
Mhm.
a little bit like, in my opinion, an Uma product is like a nice glass of wine that you reward yourself with,
Mhm.
but it won't do the work of all the other lifestyle practices that you should be doing. So that is my one hesitation as Ayurveda gains so much popularity, that I think we need to be educating in a broader way beyond product. I think we owe it to the world.
Yeah, no, I absolutely 100% agree with you. And, so I'm curious on your perspective as, a South Asian woman founder in the beauty and wellness industry, right? Sort of the challenges maybe that you have faced bringing this Ayurvedic approach and these Ayurvedic formulations to a much more global Western audience, right? Especially in the context of sort of this inside out approach, right? So what has been sort of your experience with that? Because again, you're in this both of us are in this very interesting time right now where yoga is a huge industry. It's widely popular because it works and it's also huge money.
Mhm.
And Ayurveda being a sister science, the same thing is sort of that interest is sort of growing, growing, growing. And because both of us have been doing this for a while, we're sort of at the forefront. We have front seats to that. How are you approaching that? That sort of intersection of really staying true to what Ayurveda is, but then bringing it to a global audience.
I will say that desire and approach doesn't come without a lot of conflict that I am trying to solve on a quarterly, monthly, daily basis, because the issue is that while people want Ayurveda, they
Mhm.
want to make it Western. And yes, give me this, but summarize it down to a hot ingredient. What is the hot
Right.
Ayurvedic ingredient that
Sure.
we can SEO around and
Mhm.
popularize in mainstream media? And it's very, very difficult to then communicate to an audience that is so hardwired
Right.
to respond or write or listen or consume in that minute long attention span format, that
Right.
I am sorry, I'm going to disappoint you. There are
Right.
very, very few hot ingredients that are hot for everyone or hot
Mhm.
every season,
Right.
etc. So the challenge of sort of being handed a mic but at the same time westernize the dialogue is something that I wrangle with on a daily basis, because you want to have the impact, you want more people to be listening, but then how do you stay authentic? And I like to think we choose the right path most of the time, especially in terms of I have never quote unquote bastardized a process. When someone says oil pulling, how many minutes? Well, the Vedas would say ideally go a good 20 minutes, but
Right.
Western science would indicate that 8 minutes is when sort of the antibacterial action really starts to kick in. So you sort of have to find the middle ground for, and I'm that person too. I don't have kids, but I have very crazy busy mornings. I mean, 20 minutes is a full on commitment. So I go back to the Ayurvedic spirit of moderation, that 8 to 10 minutes, while putting on the coffee and and going
Right.
into the shower are great ways to pass the
Yes.
time. Or
Mhm.
if you don't do it every day, try to squeeze it in 3 days a week. And
Right.
fortunately, there is enough in Ayurveda that supports approaches of moderation that I feel good about those decisions. But I would say that is something that I parse in my head constantly in terms of how we take Ayurveda to the modern world.
Yeah, I think it's something that many of us who are in this field really struggle with, because we want to be true to the Vedic knowledge, to what's been handed down to us, but also meet people where they are and modernize it.
Yes.
What I always find so fascinating, though, is that when I come up against those challenges, I'm always so like amazed at how forward thinking these sages were when they wrote this down, because it seems that we can modernize it every time we need to, which is
It blows my
incredible,
mind
right?
that
It
this
blows my
this
mind that
is so true.
it was written so many thousands of years ago and has been practiced for so long, yet we can still keep sort of moving it forward, staying true to what it was, but also meeting people where they are. I'm blown away all the time by um, that fact. I just, it's incredible to me. So I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And it is truly is incredible. A friend of mine who is, very, very American, born and raised, and so on. Often, I introduced her to Ayurveda, and she is sort of embraces it fully. And anytime sort of questions of, but how does it jive with modern science? She will give such interesting examples, including the reference to Vimans in Ramayana. And she would go to bat for Indian sciences. Listen, you don't understand. India had a very rich cultural heritage, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there was an existence of science that was way beyond its years. And I find that sort of like both heartening and amusing that she jumps to sort of
Right.
the science of India from
Mhm.
thousands of years ago in a rich and defensible way. So it is cool how forward thinking the sages were.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a fascinating discussion, and we could keep going up. Well,
I
we're going to
know.
switch gears here, and let's talk about some of the things that I think a lot of listeners really struggle with, which is, how can they sort of incorporate Ayurvedic approaches to skincare into their routines? Given that we live in a modern world, everyone feels to be time starved all the time, right? And so, routines, and I often talk about that on this podcast. All the listeners know that this is like something we talk about all the time, is that daily routines are a fundamental sort of foundation in Ayurveda. And so what are some, Ayurvedic routines that we can incorporate for skincare? Because I think there's also, and maybe there's two parts to this question. And, what are those routines and how do you see that they sort of not only contribute to that outside in approach of sort of the actual skin health from the outside in, but then also from the inside out of the emotional aspects, right? Because there's both aspects that affect our skin.
Of course. And I don't know if you're going to like this, but I will start with some of the non-topical stuff I swear by. Tongue scraping is one. In fact, it's finding legs in the West because many people are starting to see the connection between tongue gunk and actual bacteria in your body that can lead to things like acne. So highly swear by tongue scrapers.
Mhm.
I do like the idea of warm water and lemon in the morning, first thing, as often as you can, within reason, with the modern lifestyles, dry brushing the skin before a shower,
Mhm.
as well as oil pulling are two things I love in the morning when I can get it in. Conversely, at night, I love the idea of rubbing one's feet with oil and actually giving yourself a hair massage on nights that you might be planning to either tie your hair in the morning or, have a hair wash.
Mhm.
I also like navel oiling,
Mhm.
which is a nice nightly routine, which in my experience as well as my study has really helps with rasayana as well in the body and detoxification. So it can even help regularity. And then you'll find things like your lips are more moisturized in the morning, even by oiling your belly button at night. So, with those guys aside, some of the more topically related things I love are self massage. Sometimes the idea of a body self massage can seem more pleasurable if it's a nice fragrant oil, which is why our company sort of focuses on the luxury of the experience so much. These were all formulas created for the queens and kings at the time. So they do have this ritualistic luxury at the forefront when you apply them, but which is not to say you can't sort of create your own luxury rituals, whether
Right.
it's by fresh batching something or just giving yourself a great massage with coconut oil or olive oil or
Mhm.
dosha prakriti specific oil. I do love the idea of something like a facial tool. In Ayurveda, we use Kansa wands a lot because the bronze alloy is very, very beneficial for the skin, ideally focusing on facial marma points. But, you know, if you can, spend 3 to 5 minutes at night, you're in bed, just giving yourself a nice facial massage. And for many people, this can be a moment of mini meditation. I struggled with meditation for a long time and would instead do these rituals or a little bit of pranayama in lieu of traditional meditation. And I found those things very helpful because you touched on the emotional side. And when I was doing these rituals, I found was the first time in the day I was confronting my emotions. That
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
very often, if I had been sort of upset at a colleague for the way they talked to me, or maybe even my mother, that I should have said that and I hadn't observed my emotion, I'd buried it. And Ayurveda says don't react to that emotion, but observe it and release it. And I
Mhm.
found that while doing these pleasurable rituals, I was connecting to my emotional self and addressing and taking stock of my
Mhm.
day in a way that was a pathway to more understanding of both my mind, my emotional well being, and eventually sort of focusing on my physical well being in a more 360 way than sort of just saying, okay, if I'm going to work out for 40 minutes a day and run from X and Y, I am okay. Ayurveda asks for more than that. And those are some of the things that I would say. And the final one is, you touched on this, the idea of face masks.
Mhm.
Avanti, you talked about turning 40, 50. One
Yeah.
of the things that medical science will show you is in our 30s, skin is turning over every 30 days. In our 40s, it switches to once every 45. This is why, things like retinol are gaining steam, because they help your skin turn over.
Mhm.
Ayurveda's solution to that had always been these face masks that you
Right.
did often with your mom, aunt, girlfriends,
Right.
and they were community affairs, so fun. But home batching face masks with things like honey, banana, turmeric, aloe, things, papaya, lemon juice, yogurt, things like that. There's, like, I'm not going to regale you with all those recipes. They're a dime by the dozen on the internet. That is one thing. Like, gentle exfoliation, but regularly ritualistic, is very important to sort of preserving the youthfulness and longevity of skin.
Yeah, because you're helping with that cellular turnover, right? So,
Exactly.
just to sort of go back to some of the things that you said, what I was thinking about as you were, naming some of these different rituals is that most of them, from my perspective, and of course, I just wrote a whole book on this with, these 5 longevity switches, as I call them, that will really help to support longevity. And you talked about, toxin removal, the tongue scraping, the oil pulling, even Garshana, which is dry brush, right? With silk gloves more. Those are all things that help to remove toxins. Even Abhyanga, the self oil massage, what we're doing is we're also removing toxins from the
Such a
skin, which
big
is the
part of Panchakarma. Like, Abhyanga
exactly.
is so you're out, while it feels more like a Rasayana practice,
Sure.
nourishment, but it's actually around toxin removal. You're
Exactly.
absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's almost like a 2 for 1 because you have
Yes.
that toxin removal aspect. I mean, tongue cleaning is not, necessarily like ritualistic, pleasurable, but I mean, I love doing it. I've been doing it
I
since
mean,
I
if
was
you
born.
lean into how fresh your mouth feels
Exactly.
after, then
Yep,
it can
you're
become
right.
this thing.
You're right. But, so many of the things that you talked about have sort of this dual effect of being a toxin removal, but also at the same time, very nourishing to the skin. And, from a Western standpoint, what you're doing is you're preserving the elasticity and the youthfulness of the skin, because by massaging, you're helping with the elasticity of the skin, but then also that gentle exfoliation helps to turn over the skin, right? So there's some very, very practical reasons also that we would do these things. And then I think your point about it being very nourishing and relaxing and a time to sort of face emotions, things that maybe we've been suppressing all day. That's hugely important for our skin too, because again, going back to sort of how we started this conversation, in Ayurveda, we believe that the skin is a mirror of what's going on inside, right?
Right.
And so that's exactly what you're speaking to, is that if you were not to use these rituals to sort of process and deal with your emotions, they're going to show up on your skin, right?
Avanti, I feel like I need you in my life every second of every minute, because you so eloquently and with a lovely sort of Western backed approach and science backed approach eloquently summarized everything that sort of my verbal diarrhea tried to cover. But that's exactly so well put. I mean, and it makes sense the way you said it. It's very attractive, and every time I find myself maybe not following Ayurvedic principles, I will go back to your summarizing this so nicely, because
Uh,
it's attractive sounding.
Right, right. I mean, it feels so nourishing. And and this goes back to, this is not just about being preventative. It's also being protective of the skin
Yes.
for longevity, right? That's what this comes down to also. I would love to know from your perspective, again, because you are formulating these skincare products, and again, while you don't want to have a blanket like this is what everybody should be using, what are some, ingredients that maybe we can be looking for when we're looking at skincare products? Because again, it can become very confusing for the consumer. There's so many products. There's so many products that are, labeled clean products. Then there's so many Ayurvedic products, some that
Yes.
are Ayurvedic, and then others that are just have a label slapped on them, right? It's really hard for most consumers to figure out what's what. So what would you suggest we kind of look for if we're looking for Ayurvedic, sort of inspired Ayurvedic, formulations of skincare?
The best sort of rule of thumb things I can think of is almost looking at what it shouldn't have alongside what it should have. Very often you will see quantities and percentages, and you can look at that by how something is categorized and listed. That'll give you a clue on whether it is truly an Ayurvedic formulation with enough Ayurvedic ingredient in
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And what it shouldn't have is, I mean, I don't, again, these are easy lists to look up, but the idea is a true Ayurvedic product stays as close as possible to how it was done hundreds and thousands of years ago, which was fresh batching.
Sure.
Okay. So why we pride ourselves on Ayurvedic product is chances are by the time you touch something, it was a seed, it was in the ground 3 to 6 months before that. And
Sure.
of course, we are unique in that we farm everything ourselves. So that standard may be untenable for
Mm-hmm.
some, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely consider these aspects of Ayurveda in that we were not making products to last three, four,
Right.
7 years.
Yes.
So in this modern time, we need to
Right.
strike a balance
Of
of, yes, it
course.
has to be shelf stable, but
Mhm.
also it's, it should not survive like nuclear reactions. And then really try to figure out why a turmeric or aloe or rose or sandalwood is in the product, and if it is actually the quote unquote active, or is it really there for marketing fluff. And some of the ways to figure that out is look at the other ingredients. Is it
Mm.
just chock full of other stuff that you've not seen traditionally in
Right.
Ayurvedic literature work together?
Uh-huh.
Then you know that it's sort of bandwagoning because turmeric's so good for the skin. So I will
Right.
take my, sunscreen and add turmeric to it in like minimal quantity so I can make that claim type of. So you're right in that there's no blanket answers, but I think just getting smart about it and even being aware, is this Ayurveda washing, can help us get
Right.
nearly halfway there.
No, I love that answer. I mean, I think that's actually really smart because that will give you so much information. Like, is it just a teeny bit of rose or turmeric and then all of the other ingredients you can't pronounce, you've never heard of them, right? Right? That's a really good point. That's a great place to start. Um, and then, like you said, looking at the percentages of those Ayurvedic actives that are
Right.
in the product, sort of considering that and just looking at that. And I think, some of it is also, doing your research about
Exactly.
which Ayurvedic brands you can really trust, which ones have been formulated with this Vedic knowledge versus which ones have been prettied up and have a label put on them because it's the new thing, sort of in the Western world. I think those are really, really important.
And when the time is right, I think relying on Ayurvedic practitioners is very important. This is something that is true for whether it is understanding your Prakriti or dosha better, a whole line of things that, hey, all of us can't have access to Ayurvedic practitioners all the time. So it's fine
Right.
to sort of study. But when the time is right, when you're there in your journey,
Mm-hmm.
having access to a practitioner, if
Mm-hmm.
that is a possibility for you,
Mm-hmm.
is something I highly, highly recommend.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with you. Is there a product that you feel is like the most important thing to use every day from a skincare perspective? And it doesn't matter what formulation, but like a category of something that all of us should really be thinking about using on a daily basis?
It will seem like a shameless plug, but some format of oil. Ayurveda and oils have a history of forever. And oil is used even for detoxing, like in Abhyanga. So, and this general sort of, again, it's changing, fortunately, hatred of oil altogether
Yeah.
is such a disservice, whether it is the right amount of ghee that you're ingesting with your diet,
Hmm.
or hair oiling, or face oiling, or body oiling. I would say it has to be, do not hate oils, embrace
Hmm.
them in
Hmm.
the format that makes sense for you.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I was hoping you would say oil because I think that that's true. I think just for the nourishment, but also for the detox benefits, it's probably the all around superstar of my skincare and my body care and my hair care, honestly. But I also grew up with that, so I have a different perspective on it too. So, um, the other question I really am sort of curious about as we're sort of rounding up our conversation is, you know, how do you think Ayurveda has really sort of shaped your perspective on aging, on longevity? Like, how does that influence how you live and what you do?
It's interesting that you should ask that question now, because it is something that I have actually really thought about over the last 1.5 years, as I am getting older. And I'll admit there is a small fear of getting older that I felt. And Ayurveda and Ayurvedic living really helped me embrace that better by seeing so many facets of life that I was ignoring. The interconnectivity of the world
Hmm.
is such a beautiful thing when you
Hmm.
lean into it, and even the interconnectivity of the mind, whatever you may sort of term a sense of spirit or that intuition or guide, how it works in a 360 fashion with your community, with your mind, with your body, gave me a lot of hope and guidance about aging and longevity, and also resharpened my intuition how I should sort of elongate my body and my mind's acuity over time. And I have Ayurveda to thank for that in a big way. I am meditating more. I am responding to changes in my body in a
Hmm.
better and more thoughtful way. And
Hmm.
I am also leaning on community more in ways that I didn't think I needed to. And because this world is interconnected, and there's an assurance from that I enjoy the thought of when I think about how Ayurveda approaches the universe. All of us are essentially made of the same elements. Everyone, in some way or the other, reacts to each other. Kindness is an important facet of
Hmm.
Ayurveda and Vedas. So, those are things that as I get older, it's very comforting to embrace them.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I would agree. It actually kind of brings me to my last question, which is, and you've talked about a lot of different things that are, sort of the Ayurvedic perspective of longevity. But, my new book is called The Longevity Formula. And so, in your experience, what would you say is sort of the essential formula for longevity where our health span equals our lifespan?
I have to possibly use a term that is very multifaceted, therefore, I feel comfortable using it. I think it's balance. I think that if you respond to imbalances in your mind, in your skin, in your body, in time, and you're attuned to those imbalances, it's not always possible to always get 7, 8 hours of sleep. It's not always possible to have an exfoliation regimen. It's not always possible to observe your emotions if you're in 3 days of back-to-back board meetings. But as long as you're maintaining a rhythm of balance for your body, for your mind, your emotional well-being, I think you will thrive. And I think if most of us asked ourselves that question, we know the answer, where
Mhm.
we are in terms of that balance, and responding to it with an approach of moderation but commitment
Mhm.
will help you with lifespan, health span, mind span. That's my perspective.
Shrankla, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I know that everyone listening is going to get so much out of your perspective and your suggestions of how to really help our skin health. So, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I profoundly enjoyed being here.